Um, so, what do you think are the nuclear safety risks that are posed by this conflict continuing on?
Well, I think the more the West gets involved, and I'm speaking specifically perhaps of France and the UK here, they're very provocative in terms of areas in the Black Sea
Hmm.
and attacking naval forces. And if it gets out of hand, I don't see I don't see why we won't see more tactical weapons being used. Not necessarily nuclear, but tactical weapons that are of a strategic uh, significance in terms of they may, completely destroy any logistical possibility of entering into Ukraine. I think that would probably be where we're going to go now, or what's
Right.
going to happen next. Is that anything logistically that allows weapons to support the Ukrainian armed forces are going to get targeted and decimated, if not already. But I definitely think there's a lot of effort in terms of tunneling those resources into Ukraine. I
Hmm.
think there's a
Hmm.
lot that's secret that's not seen to our eyes in accordance with the space space activity as well as underground activities. I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, tunneling in close to the Ukrainian border goes back to World War II, where Hitler had meetings with Mussolini on that the locust the airport closest to the Ukrainian border. I mean, there's deep historical tunnels there, so I'm convinced that they've been developed since then, and maybe from Romania as well. So I would think that the amount of weapons that are going to be used are going to be significant, and we're pretty close to mistakes happening where people, this could trigger, bigger responses and more aggressive responses, and that's what I fear. But you won't find me going to no bunker. I'm on a watchtower. I'm going to watch this from a watchtower, and I'm not going to be in no bunker like no elite. I'm not interested in that. I would be more interested in praying out over my watchtower to stop this from escalating.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned being disillusioned in Trump, or to something of that effect. What do you think of this idea that him posturing to take Canada and Greenland being something that would be super destructive to NATO, and if NATO were to break apart, this of course might help things come to an end quicker, wouldn't you say, or no? What do you think about all that?
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's realistic in terms of actually happening. What I do see is the history of Donald Trump. Let's go
Hmm.
back with his what is Donald? Donald Trump is an entertainer. He's been on WWE. Like
Right.
he's an entertainer. He even in the wrestling, in the wrestling world, and he speaks a lot of nonsense in terms of distracting what he's going to be doing next. And
Yes. Yes.
basically the strategy behind the United States right now is strategic sequencing, which means they're going from conflict to conflict right now that they can handle. So you could see that they just completed operations in Venezuela and now they're on to kind of a Cuba, kind of Iran situation. So they're strategically sequencing the world efforts, right? So they're trying to put off Ukraine right now because they are in over their head there, big time, and so much equipment has been destroyed, so much resources, so much money has been stolen, so
Hmm.
much taxpayers' efforts, and so much of that has been is coming out now more and more and more. And actually, it's one of the things I pray a lot about daily is that corrupt institutions right now get exposed. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of those prayers. We're seeing big corruption get unraveled. And unfortunately, I don't see institutions responding in a legalistic manner. Like, unfortunately, everything that's going on in the United States right now is very telling, just very
Hmm.
telling.
Right. Right. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you're an ex-military guy, so you see this a little bit differently. And so what you're telling us is what you feel like you clearly see is that the Trump administration is rapidly moving us from conflict to kind of distract from what's going on and to get the attention off of Ukraine. Is that correct?
Yes, and you can see by the team he sends to Russia, he's not sending diplomats. He's sending kind of business people. They're not
Hmm.
diplomats. They don't have the intellectual toolbox to work diplomacy and create long-term, say, treaties or whatnot. It's all just um, Trump's art of the deal, which is, what can he get out of a situation? And Trump's not going to be there forever, and he's going to be one day passing on the presidency to someone else. And so have I just don't like Trump has just participated in this conflict, if not more than Biden. Just people maybe have been gaslighted to think that Trump is not doing that. He is.
Hmm.
He's the first one. Under his watch, tanks started rolling in from Greece through Romania to Russia, and that was before the invasion sort of commenced. I mean, tanks were coming here in the prior year, at the end of the prior year, and I knew that once the hard power started coming into Ukraine, there'd be a response. What I see Russia doing is they're very, decisions are made through the Duma and through the Security Council, and they take time. Um, it's not just an irrational decision that's been made to go and protect the people of Donbass.
Hmm.
It was very measured. It was very legalistic, and I still see Putin as a very legalistic leader in terms of making sure that he's trying to conduct legal diplomacy, and sometimes that's a lot of people criticize him for that.
Hmm.
So we don't see much territorial gains because of that. They're still kind of working along the areas that were annexed in terms of having referendums or things that are not represented or not seen as legal by the Western powers. But he's very legalistic in terms of escalation. So usually when you start seeing Orezhnik missiles start flying, and there was something that occurred in Russia to elicit that response, whether trying to assassinate him, or a terrorist attack against a general, or car bombs on reporters, or drone strikes on reporters, or there's been numerous attacks. The Crocus Center attack that killed state-sponsored terrorism, basically. And yeah, it makes it for a frightening world to see all that kind of stuff happening.
Yeah.
And I just pray that it doesn't escalate to nuclear war.
Right. Well, I want to get your opinion on this since you're a military guy. And guys, I am watching for your questions. I'm marking them, and we're going to get to those soon. So, what do you think? Like, how the military conflicts? How are they affecting global supply chains? Things like dual use technology, Starlink, whatnot, weapons. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's not just about military conflict. I think the world started experiencing this with COVID as well.
Hmm.
Me being in the medical field, I was definitely working hard during the COVID pandemic,
Hmm.
sourcing everything from air exchangers to working with laboratories. I mean, I was up in a northern indigenous community at the time of the pandemic, and supply chain was difficult at best. To everybody's going after the same resources at the same time, so whoever were acting fast just kind of got the measures in place. um, and I guess I go to say that because China is such an important country on the planet in terms of providing resources across all nations of the planet. And, we're moving towards a world where, we're no longer in this unipolar world where the Americans are, the dominant power
Hmm.
economically. They may be, but, it seems obvious to me that it is going down, and that a lot of countries are now pointing towards, you know, having to do business kind of more bilaterally in a multipolar world. The sanctions that have occurred against Russia, um, I always had the idea, and I was always watching what Russia was doing, and the Putin government in terms of seeing regime changes, and I could see that he was developing Russia to be much more self-sufficient and not being so dependent on Western resources, because it was always escalating. Like, this just didn't escalate overnight. I mean, you could see it in security conferences over the years where Russia's concerns are not being heard. Russia's security concerns are just not being heard, and the conflict and the root causes of the conflict are not being addressed. There's all this tap dancing around stopping it, and it's not working, right? Like, they're just not going to ever address the elephant in the room, which is causing the conflict,
Right.
and that affects global supply. And Russia is a resource-rich country. That's its main power base, and the West is main power base is financial. So you have a financial world that's fighting a resource world, from what I can see.
Mm.
And I personally would rather have the resources than the fake money that is being produced, because money is inflationary, and it's
Mm.
very obvious. I mean, you see the price of gold, you see the price of silver. That's what's being the real resources versus the fiat currencies that are being manipulated by elite, right? They are able to print money. They're able to put out enormous amounts of packages for, whether it's gaslighting the population and supporting Ukraine with billions of dollars. If you look in Canada, the amount of resources that have come to Ukraine, and if you were to do an investigation, I'm sure much of that resources have been destroyed, have been some of it embezzled, some of the resources have left Ukraine for other territories.
Right.
And of course, there's a gigantic clandestine element to all this, right? Where we are just as simple people not going to know what resources are moving globally, um, you know, to support actions that are occurring in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complicated world, and there's lots of ability for big powers and small powers and to influence and create distractions away from fraud and leadership failure.
Right. 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 Yeah. As far as Russia being a resource country, I mean, what I think about is Russian shipping being in danger from the West if they become more desperate. And but also I look at a map and I think to myself, well, I mean, it looks like if you just look at the globe, about half of Russia's resource transport wouldn't even have to be on the ocean waters, given the way the land is all positioned. So what about?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say, like, the common narrative is that Russia's going to be a threat to Europe now imminently, and they're going to invade Europe, and that's completely nonsensical. What does Europe have to offer except for failed ideologies and debt? And there's no resources there. Like, why would Russia invade that?
Mm-hmm.
There's no need to. They're not interested in doing any European Union programs that support their own people. They're more interested in probably getting to start conscription now and building up military boogeymen to create some kind of military industrial grift that is going to really highly profit the elite of the European Union and places and American military firms.
Right. Right. What do you think of Russia attacking the infrastructure, like power and whatnot in Ukraine? How do you think this is going to affect the conflict?
Well, I think we're going to experience, retaliations here as well. I mean, of them trying to attack the infrastructure here.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why that has been the target is because of its dual use capability. Energy is critical for computers, for IT, for supporting, gigantic drone networks and
Mm-hmm.
the batteries that need to be charged. And then there's all the logistical nodes that are bringing in the resources to create, like what they say is a drone wall in terms of trying to penetrate Russia and kill troops on the ground. So, um, of course, these places are going to be attacked, and civilians. There are sometimes casualties, obviously. Um, Casualty counts in terms of Russian attacks on infrastructure are always highly, highly, highly propagandized in the West. It's going to take, like, say, a rocket hit a train. They're going to roll out, the most horrible aspects of that onto the media to paint the picture and hide the fact that the train was full of military munitions and personnel that were out going to do, troop relief on the front lines, whatnot. So,
Right.
There's not much you can take in terms of the mainstream media seriously anymore in terms of reporting on the conflict. I mean, it's
Yeah. In fact, I did a video a couple months ago about supposedly a kindergarten in Ukraine being struck by Russia, and when you looked into that, it seemed very suspect as to whether or not that actually happened the way it was being reported. But yeah.
Well, and as far as evacuating casualties and who are foreigners, you can often see that there's a higher uptick of reports of deceased ex-military members who participated perhaps as volunteers, and I won't use the word mercenaries, but volunteers, and they suddenly, perished in some kind of accident, and that's all that's being reported in the West.
Right.
There's
Right.
a gigantic
Right.
uptake of people who have gone missing, whether it be from Canada, the U.S., Venezuela, Colombia, different places that, countries are, when there's money on the table to support battalions out there, it's pretty scary what people will agree to go and do.
Right.